Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was sent to Akame ga Kill and got married to both Esdeath and Leone? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A stranger in blood-soaked lands. The world tore itself apart in a brilliant flash of light. Naruto Uzumaki felt his body being pulled in 1,000 directions at once, chakra burning through his pathways like liquid fire. One moment he had been standing on the battlefield, victorious after the Fourth Great Ninja War, watching as Sasuke finally acknowledged him as an equal. The next, reality itself seemed to fracture. What the? Naruto managed before the air was sucked from his lungs. Something was wrong. The leftover energy from Kagaya's dimensional abilities had collided with his own chakra in ways no one could have predicted. He reached out, trying to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing but the endless void of between space swallowing him whole. His consciousness flickered like a candle in the wind. When Naruto's eyes finally opened, the harsh sunlight assaulted his vision. Every muscle in his body ached as though he'd been put through one of Gai-sensei's training regimens. He blinked several times, his hand automatically reaching for his weapon's pouch as unfamiliar sounds flooded his senses. The bustle of a city. But not Konoha. Naruto sat up with a start, taking in his surroundings. He found himself in what appeared to be an alleyway between tall stone buildings. The architecture was nothing like the Hidden Leaf, more medieval in appearance, with cobblestone-s streets and buildings constructed of fitted stone rather than the wood and plaster he was accustomed to. "Where the hell am I?" he muttered, running a hand through his blonde hair. His body seemed intact, orange and black jacket, slightly torn but functional, headband still in place, weapons accounted for. Physically, he appeared unharmed, but the disorientation persisted as he struggled to his feet. Naruto closed his eyes, focusing inward. "Kurama, you there?" "I'm here, Kit," the Nine-Tails responded, his voice resonating within Naruto's mindscape. "But something is different. The chakra of this place feels wrong." "Different how?" Naruto asked, stepping toward the mouth of the alley to peer out at the bustling street beyond. "It's as if we're not in our world anymore. The Ural energy here has a different signature. It's not flowing through everything the way it should." That was concerning. Naruto had experienced dimensional travel before during the fight with Kagaya, but this felt permanent in a way those shifts hadn't. He needed information, and standing in an alley wouldn't provide it. The street beyond teemed with life. People dressed in clothing styles he'd never encountered moved about their day, shopping at market stalls or hurrying to unknown destinations. The civilization appeared relatively advanced, not modern like some of the larger cities in his world, but not primitive either. Somewhere in between, with a distinctly imperial aesthetic. No one seemed to notice him as he stepped out onto the street, which was fortunate. His bright orange clothing would have made him stand out in most places, but here, among the colorful market wares and varied garments of the populace, he merely seemed like another traveler. Naruto walked with purpose, RVing everything while trying not to appear lost. The streets were arranged in a grid-like pattern, all seemingly leading toward an enormous palace that dominated the skyline. The structure was impossibly large, with spires and towers that reached toward the heavens, surrounded by massive walls. "That has to be the center of power," he murmured. "Looks like I'm in some kind of capital city." As he ventured deeper into the urban sprawl, the stark contrast between districts became apparent. The further he moved from the palace, the more dilapidated the buildings became. Poverty was evident in the faces of the residents. Their clothes more tattered, their expressions more haggard. Something else became clear too: fear. It permeated the air like a tangible force. People here walked with their heads down, avoiding eye contact, especially when armored guards passed by. These soldiers moved with impunity, pushing civilians aside without concern, collecting what appeared to be taxes with brutal efficiency. "There's something wrong with this place," Naruto said under his breath. The disparity reminded him too much of the worst aspects of the Hidden Rain before Nagato's change of heart. "Humans and their hierarchies," Kurama commented dryly. "Some things are universal, it seems." Naruto continued his exploration, gathering information through observation. By midday, he'd discerned that he was indeed in the capital of an empire. He'd overheard enough conversations to learn that much. The emperor was apparently a child, but someone called the prime minister seemed to hold the real power. And that power was being abused in ways that made Naruto's blood boil. The sun was beginning to set when he heard the first scream. Sharp, terrified, and abruptly silenced. Naruto's body moved before his mind could process the decision. In 3 quick leaps, he ascended to a rooftop, scanning for the source of the distress. 2 blocks away, in a small courtyard behind what appeared to be a modest home, a family was being surrounded by imperial guards. By order of the Prime Minister, you are hereby sentenced to death for failure to pay your taxes in full, announced a portly officer, reading from a scroll with an air of boredom that suggested this was routine. The family, a man, woman, and 2 young children, huddled together in terror. Please, the man begged, dropping to his knees. We paid everything we could. The harvest was poor this year. We just need more time. The officer rolled up his scroll with deliberate slowness. The law is absolute. The empire has no use for those who cannot contribute their fair share. He nodded to his men. Execute them. The guards drew their swords. The children began to wail. Something in Naruto snapped. In a flash of yellow, he appeared between the family and the guards. The afterimage of his body flicker technique lingering in the air. What the? The officer stumbled backward in shock. Naruto stood tall, blue eyes cold as winter frost. You know, he said casually. Where I come from, we protect the weak. We don't execute them for being poor. The guards exchanged uncertain glances before one stepped forward, pointing his sword at Naruto's chest. Stand aside, stranger. This is imperial business. Naruto smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm making it my business. The guard lunged forward. Naruto didn't even blink. He simply shifted slightly to the side, grasped the man's wrist, and applied pressure to a specific point. The sword clattered to the ground as the guard howled in pain, dropping to his knees. I didn't even break it, Naruto said mildly. Consider that mercy. The remaining guards attacked as one. To the terrified family, what followed appeared as little more than a blur of motion. One moment, 6 armed guards were charging, the next, they all lay unconscious on the ground. Naruto stood unscathed at the center, not even breathing hard. The portly officer reached for a whistle at his belt. Bu. Chi froze when Naruto's gaze locked onto him. I wouldn't, Naruto advised. Unless you want to join them. The officer's hand trembled, then fell away from the whistle. You can't do this. This is treason against the empire. I'm not from your empire, Naruto replied. And I don't recognize the authority of anyone who would kill children for being poor. He turned to the family, his expression softening immediately. You should go, quickly. Gather whatever you can carry and leave the capital. It's not safe for you here anymore. The father stared at Naruto in disbelief. How did you? Who are you? Just someone passing through, Naruto said with a small smile. Now hurry. The family needed no further encouragement. They rushed inside their modest home, emerging minutes later with small bundles of possessions. The mother approached Naruto, tears streaming down her face. We have nothing to offer you in thanks, she said. Naruto shook his head. I don't need anything. Just get somewhere safe. As the family hurried away, Naruto turned back to the officer, who had remained frozen in place. You have a choice now. You can go back and report what happened, or you can tell your superiors that the family escaped before you could carry out the sentence. Fear and calculation warred on the man's face. The Prime Minister doesn't tolerate failure. And I don't tolerate tyranny, Naruto countered. Your choice. The officer's resolve crumbled. With a trembling nod, he backed away, then turned and fled down the street. That was unwise, Kit, Kurama rumbled within him. Ave just announced our presence to whoever rules this place. I couldn't just watch them die, Naruto replied inwardly. Besides, now we'll see what kind of response this generates. Information gathering, right. The fox's snort conveyed what he thought of that rationalization. Night was falling properly now, and Naruto needed a vantage point. He scaled the tallest nearby building, settling on its roof to observe the capital as it transitioned from day to night. Lanterns were being lit throughout the city, creating pools of golden light amid the growing darkness. From this height, the contrast between the opulent inner districts and the squalor of the outer rings was even more pronounced. The palace shimmered with hundreds of lights, while large sections of the poorer districts remained in near total darkness. Something is seriously wrong with this place, Naruto muttered. Focus on finding a way home, Kurama advised. This isn't our world, and these aren't our problems. Naruto frowned. You know I can't ignore suffering, Kurama. I know. That's what worries me. As the night deepened, Naruto noticed movement on the rooftops several blocks away. Fast, coordinate, D shadows leaping between buildings with purpose. He narrowed his eyes, focusing chakra to enhance his vision. A group of about 6 individuals, moving with the precision that spoke of training and experience. Not regular soldiers, these were something else. Assassins, perhaps. Curiosity piqued. Naruto followed, maintaining a careful distance. The group converged on a large mansion in what appeared to be the upscale district of the capital. With military precision, they disabled guards and infiltrated the compound. Naruto perched on a neighboring roof, watching the operation unfold. These weren't random killers, they moved with too much coordination. A resistance group, perhaps. Minutes later, screams erupted from within the mansion. Naruto tensed, debating intervention, when he caught a glimpse of one of the attackers exiting through an upper window. A young woman with wild blonde hair and what appeared to be animal ears. She moved with feline grace, blood splattered across her minimal clothing and metal claws. Before he could process this strange sight, the woman paused, her head turning in his direction. Even at this distance, Naruto could see her eyes narrow as she sensed his presence. For a moment, they stared at each other across the night. Then the woman grinned, a predatory, challenging expression, and gestured to her companions. In seconds, the entire group had vanished into the shadows. Their mission apparently complete. Naruto remained motionless, processing what he'd witnessed. Those weren't ordinary fighters. They possessed skills comparable to trained shinobi. And their target had clearly been specific. An assassination, executed with precision. You're not the only dangerous one in this world, Kurama observed. That woman saw me, Naruto replied. She knew I was watching. And seemed amused by it. Interesting. Naruto decided to investigate the mansion. Moving swiftly across rooftops, he reached the compound in seconds. The scene inside confirmed his suspicions, a targeted killing. The victim, a middle-aged man in expensive clothing, lay dead in his study. Documentation scattered around him suggested involvement in something called human experimentation. They're vigilantes, Naruto realized, examining the papers. This man was conducting experiments on kidnapped civilians. The sound of approaching boots told him the Imperial Guards were responding to the attack. Naruto slipped out through the window, returning to the shadows of the rooftops. As he moved away, he noticed a symbol painted in blood on the wall of the study, a bird-like emblem he hadn't recognized. A calling card. These killers wanted their work attributed to their group. By midnight, Naruto had found temporary shelter in an abandoned storehouse near the city's edge. He needed to process everything he'd learned and develop a plan. 3 priorities presented themselves. Discovering how to return to his world, understanding this empire and its power structures, and deciding what role, if any, he should play in the obvious conflict simmering beneath the surface. I could just focus on finding a way home, he said aloud, thinking through his options. That would be the sensible approach. Kurama agreed. But I can't ignore people suffering if I can help them. Also predictable. The fox sighed within him. Your compassion will be the death of you someday, Naruto. It's saved me more times than it's endangered me, Naruto countered with a small smile. Besides, helping people here might lead to information about dimensional travel. 2 birds, 1 stone. A tenuous justification at best. Naruto chuckled and leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes to meditate. He needed to center himself and properly assess the nature of his chakra in this world. As he slipped into a meditative state, he became aware of subtle differences in how natural energy flowed here. It wasn't absent, as Kurama had initially suggested, but it moved differently, like a river with unfamiliar currents. I think I can still gather sage chakra, he murmured, but it might behave differently. Be cautious, Kurama warned. Until we understand the natural laws of this place, any powerful techniques could have unexpected consequences. Naruto nodded, then froze as his enhanced senses detected movement outside the storehouse. Someone was approaching, with stealth that would make most shonen proud. He opened his eyes, body tensing in readiness. The presence circled the building once, twice, then settled on the roof directly above him. Waiting, watching, Naruto considered his options. He could pretend ignorance, confront the observer, or attempt to slip away unnoticed. The choice was made for him when a husky female voice called down from a hole in the ceiling. "You know, most people don't notice when I'm tracking them. You're either very good or very paranoid." Naruto looked up to see the same blonde woman from the assassination, now peering down at him through a gap in the roof beams. In the dim moonlight filtering through the hole, he could make out her features more clearly: wild golden hair, amber eyes with vertical pupils, and what appeared to be animal ears atop her head. She wore minimal clothing that accentuated an athletic, curvaceous figure, and those metal claws he'd noticed earlier were now retracted. "Both," Naruto replied honestly. "In my line of work, you don't survive by being unaware of your surroundings." The woman dropped through the hole, landing with feline grace a few meters away. Up close, Naruto could see that what he'd thought were costume ears were actually part of her. They twitched and swiveled independently, following sounds. A belt-like tail swished behind her, completing the leonine impression. "And what exactly is your line of work?" she asked, circling him slowly. "You're not Imperial Army. They're not nearly as skilled. You're not from the Revolutionary Army either. I know all their operatives. So who exactly drops into our capital, interferes with an Imperial execution, and then watches Night Raid conduct a mission?" Night Raid. So that was the name of her group. Naruto remained relaxed but vigilant. "Would you believe I'm just a traveler who doesn't like seeing families executed for being poor?" The woman stopped her circling, a hint of surprise in her expression. "You actually saved that family. I thought the rumors were exaggerated." 6 guards and an officer, Naruto confirmed. "None dead, though they'll have headaches when they wake up." She studied him with renewed interest. "You left them alive. Interesting choice. They'll just continue enforcing the Empire's tyranny tomorrow." "Killing isn't always the answer," Naruto replied. "Sometimes people need a chance to reconsider their path." The woman's laugh was sharp and bitter. "In this empire, the only good Imperial soldier is a dead one. You must not be from around here to believe otherwise." "That's complicated," Naruto admitted. "Let's just say I'm very far from home." She approached closer, her movements liquid and predatory. "I'm Leone," she introduced herself, apparently deciding that sharing her name wasn't a risk. "And you are Naruto Uzumaki." "Strange name," Leone commented. "Strange clothes too. Strange everything about you, really." She sniffed the air. "Even your scent is different. Not quite human." "She can smell me," Kurama noted with interest. "This one has animal characteristics beyond the cosmetic." Leone's eyes narrowed. "You're hiding something. Something powerful." Naruto held her gaze steadily. "Aren't we all?" This earned him another laugh, more genuine this time. "Fair point." She dropped into a casual crouch across from him. "So, Naruto Uzumaki, what are your intentions in the capital? Because if you're planning to interfere with Night Raid's missions, we're going to have a problem." "I'm trying to find a way home," Naruto answered truthfully. "But I won't ignore people suffering if I can help them." Leone studied him for a long moment, her animal ears twitching thoughtfully. "The family you saved said you moved faster than the eye could follow. They said you took down 6 armed guards without breaking a sweat." "They exaggerate," Naruto said modestly. "Do they?" Leone's grin turned predatory again. "Prove it." Before the last word had fully left her lips, she lunged at him with astonishing speed, claws extending from her fingers mid-leap. Naruto reacted instinctively. He sidestepped the attack with fluid precision, using only the barest minimum movement necessary. Leone twisted in midair, adjusting her trajectory with feline reflexes, but found herself grabbing empty air as Naruto seemed to flow around her strikes like water around stone. After 10 seconds of failed attacks, Leone jumped back, eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and excitement. "You didn't even try to counterattack," she observed, breathing slightly harder. "I don't want to fight you." Naruto replied simply. But you could, she pressed, circling him again. You're holding back. A lot. Naruto shrugged. So are you. This earned him a genuine smile. Smart and observant. I like that. Leone relaxed her stance slightly. You know, we could use someone with your skills. The empire is rotten to the core. The prime minister manipulates the child emperor, allowing the nobility to commit atrocities while the common people suffer. And Night Raid's solution is assassination. We cut out the corruption one target at a time, Leone confirmed without apology. Each person we eliminate has committed unspeakable crimes. The man tonight, he kidnapped young women from the slums for beauty experiments. What was left of them wasn't recognizable as human. Naruto's expression darkened. I saw the documentation. Then you understand why we do what we do. Leone moved closer, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone. Join us. Help us bring down the empire. With your abilities, we could save countless lives. The offer was tempting in its directness. Naruto had always fought to protect others, and this empire clearly needed changing. But so, nothing held him back, a caution born from experience. I need to understand this place better before I commit to any cause, he said finally. Even one that seems just. Leone nodded, surprising him with her acceptance. Smart again. Take your time. Observe the capital. See the atrocities for yourself. She stretched, her movements deliberately emphasizing her athletic form. But don't take too long. In this place, neutrality is just another word for complicity. She moved toward the door but paused before leaving. Oh, and Naruto, the Imperial Army will be looking for you after today's stunt. Their commander, General Esdeath, returned to the capital yesterday. If she finds you before you decide to join us. Leone's expression grew serious. Well, let's just say I'd hate to lose an interesting potential ally before we really got to know each other. With that warning delivered, she slipped into the night, leaving Naruto alone with his thoughts. She's dangerous, Kurama commented. Yes, Naruto agreed, but I don't think she was lying about the empire. Whether she lied or not is irrelevant. This isn't our world, and their war isn't our concern. Naruto sighed, knowing he Fox was right in principle but feeling the pull of conscience nonetheless. Let's focus on gathering more information tomorrow. I need to understand the power structures here better. And find a way home, Kurama reminded him. That too, Naruto agreed, settling back into a meditative position. But first, rest. As he closed his eyes, Leone's warning about someone called Esdeath echoed in his mind. The name itself sounded ominous, and the way Leone had spoken it suggested someone to be genuinely feared. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. For now, he needed to recover his strength and deprocess everything he'd learned about this blood-soaked empire. Dawn broke over the capital, pale light filtering through the cracks in the storehouse walls. Naruto had slept lightly, one part of his consciousness always alert for danger. He rose smoothly to his feet, stretching muscles that had grown stiff from the night on the hard floor. First priority, he murmured to himself, food and information. Venturing out into the early morning streets, Naruto kept his senses extended, alert for any sign of pursuit. The city was already stirring to life, merchants setting up stalls in the market district. Laborers trudging toward daily work, and imperial guards patrolling in greater numbers than the previous day. Naruto noticed wanted posters being nailed to posts and walls, crude drawings of Night Raid members, including Leone. The rewards offered for their capture were substantial. He was relieved to see no depiction of himself among them. Apparently, the officer from yesterday had chosen the wiser path of claiming the family had escaped before he arrived. Finding food proved simpler than expected. A kindly older woman selling steamed buns took pity on what she assumed was a low-saint traveler and offered him breakfast in exchange for helping her set up her stall. Naruto accepted gratefully, using the opportunity to gather information as they worked. The Imperial Guards seemed tense today, he observed casually. The woman glanced around nervously before responding in a lowered voice. Night Raid struck again last night. Killed Lord Gaiden and his entire household. He was one of the Prime Minister's favorites. Night Raid. Naruto feigned ignorance. I've just arrived in the capital. Who are they? The woman's eyes widened. Assassins. Revolutionaries. Depending on who you ask. They're either heroes or terrorists. She leaned closer. They target the corrupt nobility, those who abuse their power most flagrantly. The common folk, well, many secretly cheer when another cruel lord meets night raids justice. But not openly, Naruto noted, observing how she kept checking for listening ears. The Prime Minister would execute anyone caught supporting them. She Fini, shed arranging her wares and handed Naruto a warm bun. Here, eat, and be careful what you say in the capital, young man. The walls have ears. Naruto thanked her for both the food and the advice, then continued his exploration of the city. With each hour that passed, the picture grew clearer and more disturbing. The empire operated on institutionalized cruelty, with the wealthy few living in obsc. In luxury while the masses suffered under crushing taxation and arbitrary justice. By midday, he'd witnessed 3 public executions for minor offenses, seen children begging in the streets while nobles passed in gilded carriages, and observed the terror that ordinary citizens displayed whenever imperial guards approached. This place is worse than I thought, Naruto said quietly as he perched on a rooftop, observing the central plaza where the latest execution had taken place. And yet not your problem to solve, Kurama reminded him. Naruto frowned. I can't just. His retort was cut short by a sudden commotion in the plaza below. The crowds were parting in haste, people pressing themselves against walls or fleeing outright as a procession approached from the palace direction. At its center walked a woman whose mere presence seemed to drop the temperature of the surroundings. Tall and powerfully built, with long blue hair and pale skin, she moved with absolute confidence. Her uniform marked her as a high-ranking military officer, but it was the aura of casual lethality that truly set her apart. That must be Esdeath, Naruto murmured, recalling Leone's warning. The general was accompanied by a group of uniformed men who practically radiated danger themselves, elite soldiers, clearly. They flanked her protectively, though from Naruto's vantage point, it was obvious that she needed no protection. The woman's posture, movement, and eyes all spoke of someone who had mastered combat to an exceptional degree. As if sensing his scrutiny, Esdeath suddenly paused, her head tilting slightly as she scanned the rooftops. For a heart-stopping moment, her ice-blue eyes seemed to lock directly with Naruto's, despite the distance between them. A cold smile curved her lips before she continued on her way. She sensed us, Kurama growled. That one is dangerous, Kit. Perhaps even more so than the feline woman. Naruto nodded, suppressing a shiver that had nothing to do with the actual temperature. She has the eyes of a predator. Like Zabuza did, but colder. He maintained his position until the procession had passed, then changed locations, moving deeper into the city to avoid any potential search parties. As he traveled, he extended his senses, trying to detect any unusual chakra signatures that might indicate a path home. To his surprise, he did sense something, not a way home, but an energy signature that reminded him of nature chakra, concentrated in what appeared to be a massive park or forest at the edge of the capital. Curious, Naruto changed direction, heading toward this potential source of information. The park turned out to be an enormous hunting ground reserved for nobility, with lush forests and artificial lakes sprawling over several square kilometers. Signs warned commoners away under penalty of death, but such threats meant little to someone who could simply leap over the high perimeter walls unseen. Within the forest, the concentration of natural energy grew stronger. Naruto followed it to its source, a secluded clearing where an ancient tree stood, its trunk wider than 10 men standing with arms outstretched. The tree radiated an energy similar to, but distinct from, the natural chakra of his world. This might help us understand the dimensional differences, Naruto said, approaching the tree cautiously. Be careful, Kurama warned. The energy patterns are unstable. Naruto placed his palm against the rough bark, closing his eyes to better sense the flow of power. Immediately, images flooded his mind, fragmentary glimpses of this world's history. Of terrible weapons called imperial arms, forged from the remains of danger beasts, of wars and empires rising and falling. He gasped, pulling his hand away. Did you see that, Kurama? I saw enough to know this world has its own form of power, these imperial arms. They're not chakra-based, but they're formidable weapons nonetheless. And those creatures, danger beasts, they called them. Naruto frowned thoughtfully. They're like this world's equivalent of the tailed beasts, in a way. Pale imitations at best, Kurama sniffed disdainfully. Naruto chuckled at the fox's pride, then stiffened as his senses alerted him to approaching presences, multiple signatures, moving with purpose. "We've got company," he murmured, leaping into the upper branches of the ancient tree. From this vantage point, he could observe without being seen. Minutes later, a group entered the clearing. Naruto recognized Esdeath immediately, her blue hair unmistakable. Shish. He was accompanied by 4 individuals who moved with the deadly grace of elite assassins, her personal squad, perhaps. The reports were correct, Esdeath was saying, her voice carrying clearly to Naruto's enhanced hearing. Someone with unusual abilities interfered with a tax collection yesterday. 6 elite guards defeated without suffering fatal injuries. A weakling who can't kill. One of her companions scoffed. A young man with wild white hair and maniacal eyes. Sounds boring. Don't be so quick to judge, Niao, Esdeath replied, her tone chilling. Someone who can defeat 6 armed men without killing them possesses control far beyond the average fighter. That speaks of training and experience. She surveyed the clearing slowly. And now we track unusual energy readings to this location. Coincidence? What are your orders, General? Asked another companion, a massive man with a stoic expression. Esdeath smiled, and the expression made Naruto's skin crawl despite his years of facing dangerous opponents. It wasn't merely cruel or sadistic, it was the smile of someone who saw the world as nothing but prey. We expand our search, she declared. I want this individual found. The description matches no known Revolutionary Army operative, which makes them either a new recruit or... Her smile widened. Something more interesting. And when we find them? Asked the massive man. Esdeath's eyes gleamed with anticipation. If they're strong, I want them alive. The Empire can always use talented fighters, willingly or otherwise. The group departed shortly after, leaving Naruto alone with troubling thoughts. He had now drawn the attention of both Night Raid and the Empire's strongest general. Maintaining neutrality was becoming increasingly difficult. We should focus on finding a way home, Kurama advised. These factions will destroy each other with or without our intervention. But what if knowledge of how to cross dimensions exists only within the Empire's records? Naruto countered. I might need allies to access that information. Then choose carefully, Kit. The feline woman offers one path, this ice general another. Neither seems particularly trustworthy. Naruto nodded, leaping down from the tree. As his feet touched the ground, he felt a subtle shift in the energy surrounding him, a momentary flicker, like reality itself hiccuping. Did you feel that? He asked sharply. Yes. Dimensional instability. Your presence here is having an effect on this world's energy patterns. That was concerning. If his very existence was causing disruptions, the situation could become dangerous for everyone, not just himself. Finding a way home wasn't merely a personal goal anymore, it might be necessary to prevent catastrophe. As darkness began to fall, Naruto made his way back toward the capital, mind racing with plans and contingencies. He needed more information about these imperial arms, about the full scope of the conflict between the Empire and the revolutionaries. And most importantly, about any technology or power that might help him return to his own dimension. The shadows lengthened as he traversed the rooftops, staying out of sight of the increased patrols below. The capital at night took on a different character. Behind the facade of civilization, the true nature of the Empire revealed itself. Screams occasionally echoed from mansions where nobles indulged their cruel whims, while in the slums, people huddled behind locked doors, fearing both criminals and authorities equally. Naruto paused on the edge of a towering administrative building, gazing out over the sprawling city. From here, he could see the entire capital spread before him, from the gleaming palace at its heart to the squalid outskirts where the poorest citizens struggled to survive. The contrast reminded him painfully of his own world's inequities, the differences between major villages and forgotten outposts, between clan children and orphans like himself. He had fought to change that system, to build a world where such disparities would gradually disappear. Here, the inequity wasn't merely present, it was deliberately engineered and maintained. I can't solve all this world's problems, he murmured, but I can't just walk away either. Then find a middle path, Kurama suggested with unusual pragmatism. Help where you can while pursuing our main objective. Naruto nodded, his resolve hardening. Tomorrow, he would begin actively seeking information about dimensional travel while continuing to observe the major factions. When the time came to choose allies, he would do so based on his own moral compass, not merely convenience. As he turned to find shelter for the night, a flicker of movement caught his attention, a shadow detaching itself from a chimney stack nearby. "You're a hard man to find," Leone's voice carried across the rooftop. "Though not as hard as you should be, considering who's looking for you." Naruto turned to face her, noting that she was dressed more conventionally tonight, perhaps to avoid recognition. "I've been exploring, so I see." Leone approached, her movements as fluid as the previous night. Death has her 3 beasts hunting for you. They're in the Western District right now, questioning people who match your description. "Why tell me this?" Naruto asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Leone's smile was half predatory, half genuine. "Because I'm still hoping you'll make the right choice. Night Raid could protect you, give you purpose. At the cost of becoming an assassin. At the cost of admitting that some people don't deserve mercy." Leone's expression hardened. "You haven't seen the worst of what the Empire's elite do to innocent people." "I have." Naruto met her gaze steadily. "I've seen more darkness than you might think. But I've also seen people change, even those who seemed beyond redemption." Leone's laugh held little humor. "Not in this empire. Here, the sea. Erupt stay corrupt until someone puts a blade through their heart." She stepped closer, her amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. "But enough recruitment talk for one night. What were you doing in the Imperial Park?" "That place is reserved for nobility." "Research," Naruto answered truthfully. "I sensed an unusual energy signature there." Leone's eyebrows rose. "You can sense Imperial arms. Is that what it was?" Naruto feigned partial ignorance, watching her reaction carefully. "The ancient tree is said to be connected to the first emperor's imperial arm," Leone explained, studying him with renewed interest. "Only certain people can sense their presence without seeing them. It's a rare talent." Naruto filed this information away. It confirmed what he'd gleaned from touching the tree. These imperial arms were this world's equivalent of legendary weapons, each with unique powers. "I'm looking for information about transportation between worlds," Naruto said, deciding to be direct. "Or dimensions. Does such knowledge exist in this empire?" Leone's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "Between worlds. That's unusual." She circled him slowly, as seemed to be her habit when thinking. "There are legends about the first emperor having the power to glimpse other realms, but that's ancient history. Where would records of such legends be kept?" "The Imperial Library, most likely. Deep within the palace." Leone's grin returned. "Coincidentally, a place much easier to infiltrate if you had the backing of a certain assassination group." Naruto couldn't help but smile at her persistence. "You don't give up easily, do you?" "It's not in my nature," she replied with a wink. Cats are stubborn creatures. Their conversation was interrupted by a distant scream, not the brief cry of someone being attacked, but the prolonged wail of genuine horror. Both warriors tensed, heads turning toward the sound. "That came from the entertainment district," Leone said, her playfulness vanishing instantly. Without another word, both leapt into motion, crossing rooftops with practiced ease. Leone moved with feline agility, while Naruto matched her pace without difficulty. They traveled in silent coordination, as though they had worked together for years rather than having just met. The screams led them to an upscale theater district, where panicked civilians were fleeing from a grand performance hall. Inside, chaos reigned. Bodies littered the ornate lobby, blood splattered across marble floors and velvet drapes. Leone growled low in her throat, the sound purely animalistic. "The 3 beasts. This is their handiwork." Naruto scanned the carnage, his experienced eyes taking in details civilians might miss. These weren't targeted killings. This was random slaughter. Esdeath's squad doesn't need reasons. Leone spat. "They kill for pleasure." A movement deeper in the theater caught Naruto's attention. Someone still alive, crawling desperately toward an exit. He rushed forward, kneeling beside the wounded man. "What happened here?" Naruto asked, already assessing the injuries. "Multiple stab wounds, severe but not immediately fatal if treated." They came out of nowhere," the man gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "Said they were looking for someone. When no one could tell them anything, they just started killing." Said it would send a message. Naruto's expression darkened. They're looking for me. Leone appeared at his side. Now do you understand what we're fighting against? This is the Empire, slaughtering innocents to flush out one person. Before Naruto could respond, a new presence made itself known, a cold, oppressive aura that seemed to chill the very air. Both warriors turned to face the main entrance, where a lone figure stood silhouetted against the streetlights beyond. General Esdeath surveyed the scene with clinical detachment, her ice-blue eyes eventually finding Naruto kneeling beside the wounded man. A slow smile spread across her face. "So," she said, her voice carrying easily across the blood-soaked lobby, "the mysterious stranger reveals himself at last." Leone tensed beside Naruto, her body language shifting into combat readiness. "This is bad," she whispered. "Even with both of us, Esdeath is, get the wounded out," Naruto interrupted quietly. "I'll handle this." Leone stared at him incredulously. "You can't be serious. That's General Esdeath, the Empire's strongest." "Trust me," Naruto said, rising to his feet. "I've faced worse." Leone hesitated, clearly torn between staying to fight and taking the opportunity to save lives. Finally, she nodded. "Don't die. Night Raid still needs an answer from you." With that, she began quickly moving among the wounded, helping those who could walk toward the rear exits. Naruto stepped forward, placing himself between Esdeath and the retreating survivors. The general watched this with apparent amusement. "Brave," she commented, sounding genuinely appreciative. "Most people run when they see me. You step forward instead." "I'm not most people," Naruto replied evenly. Esdeath's smile widened. "No, you certainly aren't." She took a step into the lobby, her boot acting a wet sound as it pressed into a pool of blood. "6 of my soldiers defeated without fatalities. Energy signatures that perplex our most knowledgeable scholars. And now I find you assisting the wounded after my 3 beasts' handiwork." She tilted her head slightly. "You're a curious contradiction. And you're responsible for this slaughter," Naruto countered, his voice hardening. "Innocent people killed just to draw me out." "Innocence is relative in wartime," Esdeath replied dismissively. "And it worked, didn't it? Here you are." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "What do you want from me?" "Initially, information." Esdeath began walking in a slow circle, mirroring Leone's earlier behavior but with a predator's assessment rather than curiosity. "You're clearly not from the capital. Your HTING style is unknown to our intelligence. Your abilities." Her eyes gleamed with interest. "Those are what truly intrigue me." "I'm not interested in joining your forces," Naruto stated flatly. "Ease." Death laughed, a sound both melodious and chilling. "So direct. I appreciate that." She stopped her circling, fixing him with an intense stare. "But you misunderstand. I'm not offering you a position as a subordinate." This took Naruto by surprise. "Then what are you offering?" "Partnership," Esdeath replied simply. "The Empire needs strength. I collect strong individuals. But you," her gaze intensified, "you could stand beside me, not beneath me." The proposal was unexpected enough that Naruto momentarily lost his words. Before he could formulate a response, a crash from the upper balcony drew both their attentions. 3 figures dropped down to surround Naruto, the companions he had seen with Esdeath in the forest. The 3 beasts, Leone had called them. Each exuded deadly intent, their hands already on their weapons. "General, should we capture him now?" asked the largest of the 3. Esdeath raised a hand. "No, Deidara, I want to see what he's capable of first." She stepped back, gesturing expansively. "Consider this an audition, stranger. Show me why I should value you above these 3 loyal servants." Naruto assessed his opponents quickly. The largest man, Deidara, carried an enormous battle axe that hummed with unusual energy, an imperial arm, most likely. The second, a slender, refined man with glasses, carried no visible weapons but projected lethal confidence. The third, the white-haired youth Niao, held what appeared to be a flute, his eyes dancing with sadistic anticipation. "I don't want to fight your subordinates," Naruto stated calmly. "This bloodshed is pointless. In this world, strength is the only truth," Esdeath countered. "Show me yours, or die where you stand." Naruto sighed. He had hoped to avoid combat, but it seemed inevitable now. The 3 beasts were closing in, their movements coordinated and practiced. They had clearly worked together for a long time. Very well, he said quietly. But remember, you asked for this. What happened next? He left even Esdeath momentarily speechless. As Deidara swung his massive axe in a blow that should have cleaved Naruto in two, the blonde shinobi simply wasn't there anymore. He reappeared behind the giant, a swirling blue energy forming in his palm. Rasengan, Naruto said calmly, driving the spiraling sphere not into Deidara himself, but into the floor beneath him. The impact created a localized shockwave that launched the massive man upward, crashing through the already damaged ceiling. The refined man adjusted his glasses, seemingly unperturbed. Interesting technique, but predictable movement. He launched himself at Naruto. Hands transformed into razor-sharp blades, another imperial arm manifestation. Naruto didn't bother dodging this time. Instead, a clone popped into existence. Bees eyed him, an exact duplicate that intercepted the attack while the original Naruto remained motionless. What? The bespectacled assassin barely had time to register his surprise before the clone counterattacked, sending him flying into a marble column with enough force to crack the stone. The white-haired Niao raised his flute to his lips, but before he could play a note, Naruto appeared directly in front of him, moving faster than most eyes could follow. Sound-based attacks don't work well if you can't complete the melody, Naruto commented, plucking the flute from the young man's hands with casual ease. Niao snarled, transforming into a more muscular version of himself, another imperial arm ability. He launched a flurry of punches that would have pulverized an ordinary opponent. Naruto weaved through them effortlessly, not bothering to counterattack, simply demonstrating the gap in their abilities. After allowing this to continue for several seconds, Naruto finally acted. With precise strikes to nerve clusters, he rendered Niao unconscious, catching the young man before he hit the ground and lowering him gently. The entire confrontation had lasted less than a minute. Esdeath stood motionless, her expression a fascinating mixture of shock, analysis, and something else. Something that made Naruto more uncomfortable than her earlier killing intent. Excitement, exhilaration, desire. Magnificent, she breathed, her eyes wide with an almost religious fervor. Such speed, such precision. And you still refuse to kill them, even after what they've done. She stepped forward, her earlier caution forgotten. Who are you? What are you? Naruto maintained his guard, sensing that Esdeath herself would be a far more dangerous opponent than her three beasts. Just someone who doesn't believe in unnecessary killing. Your abilities, Esdeath continued, ignoring his response. That energy technique, the duplication, these aren't imperial arms, are they? This is something else entirely. Before Naruto could respond, the building shuddered violently. Cracks appeared in the walls and ceiling, spreading rapidly as the entire structure began to groan. The foundation is compromised, Esdeath noted with clinical detachment. My subordinates will survive. As for the rest, she shrugged indifferently, then fixed Naruto with an intense stare. We'll continue this conversation elsewhere. You've proven yourself worthy of my personal attention. She extended her hand, ice forming around her fingertips. Come with me now, and I'll show you power beyond anything you've imagined. The Empire can be reshaped by individuals of our caliber. Naruto felt the building continue to destabilize around them. The few remaining wounded were still being evacuated by Leone and others who had arrived to help. He needed to buy them time. And if I refuse? He asked, already knowing the answer. Esdeath's smile was both beautiful and terrible. Then I'll have the pleasure of breaking you before rebuilding you as mine. Ice began spreading from her feet, covering the floor in crystalline patterns. Choose quickly. This building won't stand much longer. Naruto's mind raced through options. Fighting Esdeath here would endanger the remaining civilians. Escaping was possible, but would likely result in her taking her frustration out on innocents. Accepting her offer, even temporarily, might provide access to the information he needed about dimensional travel. Before he could decide, a new voice rang out from the balcony above. Naruto, the last civilians are clear. Leone stood at the railing, her body partially transformed into a more bestial form, another imperial arm ability, Naruto presumed. Beside her stood other figures that he recognized from the wanted posters, members of Night Raid. Esdeath's expression hardened as she looked up at the assassins. Night Raid, how convenient. I can eliminate several targets at once. The building gave another violent shudder, RTIONS of the ceiling beginning to collapse. Naruto made his decision in that instant, forming a hand sign familiar to any shinobi. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Dozens of identical copies of Naruto popped into existence, filling the lobby. Esdeath's eyes widened in genuine surprise at the sheer number. Another time, General, the original Naruto said, backing toward the exit as his clones moved to surround her. I suggest you retrieve your subordinates before this place comes down entirely. Esdeath's surprise gave way to that same disturbing excitement. Running away, that only makes the hunt more enjoyable. She slammed her palm to the ground, ice erupting in a wave that shattered several clones instantly. But I'll allow it, this once. Our next meeting will end differently. Naruto didn't waste time responding. As his remaining clones engaged Esdeath in a holding action, he leapt to the balcony, joining Leone and the other Night Raid members. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, Leone commented, grabbing his arm to pull him toward an exit as the building continued to collapse. Probably both. I'm often told that, Naruto replied with a grim smile. They escaped through the roof, traveling across adjoining buildings as the theater finally collapsed behind them. Naruto glanced back once, sensing Esdeath's cold aura even at this distance. She had survived, of course, as had her three beasts. And she was watching their retreat with the patient anticipation of a predator that knows it will eventually catch its prey. Leone led the group to a seemingly abandoned warehouse several districts away. Inside, the other Night Raid members regarded Naruto with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. So this is the mysterious stranger you've been talking about, a young woman with dark hair and cold red eyes. She carried a katana that radiated deadly purpose, another imperial arm, Naruto assumed. Akame. Everyone, meet Naruto, Leone introduced with a flourish. The guy who took on Esdeath's three beasts without breaking a sweat. And lived to tell about it, added a green-haired young man, his tone impressed despite his obvious wariness. That's not something many can claim. Naruto took in the group before him, young fighters, most of them, but with the hard-edged look of those who had seen too much death. They reminded him painfully of his own friends during the darker periods of their lives. Thank you for helping with the evacuation, he said sincerely. Many more would have died otherwise. That's what we do, Leone replied with a shrug. Clean up the Empire's messes when we can. The dark-haired woman, Akame, stepped forward, her red eyes assessing him with unsettling intensity. Leone says you're looking for information about dimensional travel. Why? Naruto hesitated, then decided that partial honesty was his best approach. Because I'm not from this world. I was brought here by accident, and I need to find a way back. The silence that followed this statement was profound. The Night Raid members exchanged glances ranging from disbelief to calculation. That would explain a few things, Leone finally said. Like why your fighting style is unlike anything we've seen, and why you can create those duplicates without an imperial arm. If you're truly from another world, Akame continued, her voice neutral, then why involve yourself in our conflict at all? Why not simply focus on finding your way home? It was a fair question, and one Kurama had been asking since their arrival. Naruto looked at each of the assassins in turn before answering. Because I can't ignore suffering when I have the power to help, he said simply. That's never been who I am. Leone's face split into a triumphant grin. See, I told you he'd be perfect for Night Raid. That remains to be seen, Akame cautioned, though her expression had softened slightly. But for now, we should return to base. The boss will want to meet him. As the group prepared to depart, Naruto found himself at a crossroads. Joining Night Raid, even temporarily, would mean committing to their methods, assassination, regardless of how justified their targets might be. Yet they fought against genuine tyranny, and they might have access to information he needed. And then there was Esdeath, powerful, clearly fascinated with him, and positioned at the Empire's highest levels where knowledge of dimensional phenomena might be stored. Her offer of partnership had been genuine, he sensed, but accepting it would mean aligning himself with a woman who sanctioned the slaughter of innocents. Neither path was ideal, but standing apart from both factions was becoming increasingly untenable. I'll meet your leader, Naruto decided finally. But I'm not committing to anything yet. Leone clapped him on the shoulder, her strength impressive even by shinobi standards. That's all we're asking. For now. As they moved through the shadows of the capital, Naruto fell. The weight of two gazes following him, Leone's amber eyes, curious and hopeful, and somewhere in the distance, Esdeath's ice blue stare, patient and possessive. Two powerful women, representing opposite sides of a conflict he hadn't chosen to join. Both clearly interested in him for their own reasons. Both potentially holding keys to his return home. Be careful, Naruto, Kurama warned from within. I sense this is only the beginning of our complications. Truer words had rarely been spoken. As the night deepened around them, Naruto could feel the threads of destiny beginning to weave themselves into a complex pattern, one that would eventually bind him to this blood-soaked world in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Whispers of Power. The journey to Night D's hideout took them deep into the forested mountains beyond the capital's walls. Naruto moved silently alongside his temporary companions, noting how they navigated the terrain with practiced ease. Their base was clearly well concealed, a necessity for a group of infamous assassins. Leone led the way, occasionally glancing back at Naruto with an expression that mingled curiosity and satisfaction. The others maintained a wary distance, particularly Akame, whose crimson eyes rarely left him. You're not what I expected, she finally said as they paused at a stream to rest. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? Someone more bloodthirsty. Akame's hand remained near her sword's hilt. Leone says you refused to kill the Imperial Guards. Yet you defeated Esdeath's three beasts without apparent effort. Killing isn't always necessary to win, Naruto replied simply. A green-haired young man snorted. In this empire, killing is the only permanent solution. Otherwise, they just come back stronger and angrier. That's Lubbock, Leone introduced, gesturing toward the skeptical youth. Our resident pessimist and pervert. Realist, Lubbock corrected, and connoisseur of feminine beauty. Leone rolled her eyes. Same thing. She pointed to the others in turn. You've met Akame already. The girl with the pink hair is mine. Don't let her size fool you. She'll snipe you from a kilometer away if you annoy her. The small girl in question huffed, adjusting her frilly dress. I don't waste ammunition on unimportant targets. Leone continued the introductions. The big guy is Bullet, former Imperial Army. A muscular man with distinctive hair nodded respectfully. Any enemy of Esdeath has potential as a friend. And our youngest is Tatsumi, Leone finished, indicating a brown-haired boy who looked barely out of his teens. Tatsumi studied Naruto with open curiosity. Is it true you created copies of yourself? Without an imperial arm? Naruto nodded. It's a technique from my world. Called a jutsu. This sparked a flurry of questions which Naruto answered selectively, providing enough information to satisfy their curiosity without revealing everything. By the time they resumed their journey, the tension had eased somewhat, though Akame's watchful gaze never wavered. They arrived at a massive stone building hidden deep in the forest, its architecture suggesting it had once been an outpost of some kind. Welcome to home sweet home, Leone announced. Temporary, like all our bases, but comfortable enough. Inside, the hideout was surprisingly well appointed, with common areas, training facilities, and individual rooms. Naruto was led to what appeared to be a meeting room, where a silver-haired woman awaited them. She wore a mechanical arm and an eye patch. It was the aura of command she projected that truly caught Naruto's attention. This woman had seen combat, had led others through life or death situations, and had made the hard decisions such leadership required. He recognized the look. It reminded him of Tsunade. So you're the one causing all the commotion in the capital, she observed, her single eye assessing him critically. I'm Naginda, former Imperial General and current leader of Night Raid. Naruto met her gaze steadily. Naruto Uzumaki. Not by choice, but yes, I seem to have stirred things up. Naginda gestured for him to sit. One tells me you claim to be from another world entirely. Normally, I'd dismiss such a story immediately, but... She paused, lighting a cigarette. Your abilities suggest something beyond even Imperial arms. It's the truth, Naruto confirmed. I was brought here by accident, a collision of energies during a battle in my world. And now you seek a way back, Najanda concluded. Which brings you into conflict with both the Empire and the Revolutionary Army, as neither side wants to lose a potential asset of your caliber. Naruto appreciated her directness. I'm not interested in becoming anyone's weapon. I have my own goals. As do we all. Najanda exhaled a plume of smoke. But in this world, neutrality is a luxury few can afford. Especially for someone who's caught Esdeath's attention. The name hung in the air like a threat. Naruto recalled the Ice General's cold eyes, the predatory interest she'd shown in him. What can you tell me about her? He asked. Najanda's expression darkened. Esdeath is the Empire's strongest general. A prodigy in combat even before she obtained her imperial arm, which grants her the power to create and control ice. She's led campaigns that have crushed entire nations, often through methods so brutal that even other imperial commanders find them excessive. She offered me partnership, Naruto said, watching the reactions around the room. Not as a subordinate, but as an equal. This revelation caused a stir among the Night Raid members. Najanda herself looked genuinely surprised. That's unprecedented, she finally said. Esdeath views Saint people as either pawns to be used or prey to be hunted. For her to offer equality. The former general studied Naruto with renewed intensity. She must have sensed something truly special in you. Leone moved closer, her casual posture belying the tension in her voice. You're not considering it, are you? I'm considering all options that might help me find my way home, Naruto answered honestly. Including temporary alliances with either side. Najanda nodded slowly. Pragmatic. I can respect that. She leaned forward. Here's what Night Raid can offer you. Access to our intelligence networks. Which include information on ancient imperial technologies and artifacts. Many of these relate to dimensional phenomena, especially records from the First Emperor's reign. In exchange for what? Naruto asked, though he already knew the answer. Your assistance on select missions, Najanda replied. Not necessarily assassinations, your reluctance to kill has been noted. But your abilities would be invaluable for intelligence gathering, extraction of targets, and support operations. It was a reasonable offer, better than he'd expected. Before Naruto could respond, Akame spoke up. The boss is being generous. She said quietly. Most who learn of our base location don't leave unless they've joined us. The implied threat wasn't subtle, but neither was it delivered with malice. Simply a statement of operational security. Naruto considered his options carefully. Night Raid clearly fought for the oppressed, but their methods were more extreme than he was comfortable with. Still, a temporary alliance could provide valuable information while he established himself in this world. I'll help with non-lethal operations, he decided, in exchange for access to your records and intelligence. But I won't assassinate for you. And I reserve the right to pursue my own investigations. Najanda studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Acceptable terms, for now. She gestured to Leone. Show him the archives. Let's see if anything there matches what he's looking for. As the meeting dispersed, Leone led Naruto deeper into the hideout, down to a basement level filled with bookshelves and document cases. Most of these were stolen from Imperial archives, she explained, lighting additional lamps. Records the Prime Minister would rather keep buried, atrocities, experiments, ancient technologies. Naruto examined the collection with growing interest. Any specific sections on dimensional phenomena? Leone pointed to a corner shelf. Those contain references to the First Emperor's experiments with his imperial arm. Yatsufusa. It supposedly allowed him to peer into other realms. For the next several hours, Naruto immersed himself in the ancient texts, finding tantalizing hints but no concrete information on cross-dimensional travel. The records confirmed the existence of other realms but offered no methods for traversing between them. Finding anything useful? Leone asked, perching on the edge of the table where he worked. Naruto rubbed his eyes. Fragments. The First Emperor apparently witnessed other worlds but never physically traveled to them. There's mention of something called convergence points, where the barriers between realms grow thin, but no specifics on their locations. Leone nodded thoughtfully. The capital was built on the site of a great bat. Where the First Emperor defeated a supreme danger beast. Supposedly, the creature came from beyond our world. Maybe that's why you arrived there specifically. It was a reasonable theory. If the Apetal existed at a natural weak point between dimensions, that could explain why Kagaya's residual energy had torn a passage to this specific world. I need to investigate the capital more thoroughly, Naruto decided. There might be other records, or physical manifestations of these convergence points. Perfect timing, Leone grinned. We're sending a team to gather intelligence tomorrow. You can join us. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Just intelligence. Scout's honor, she replied, raising her hand in mock pledge. No killing unless absolutely necessary. She's telling the truth, Kurama observed within him. Though her definition of absolutely necessary might differ from yours. The following morning found Naruto preparing to return to the capital with Leone, Lubbock, and Tatsumi. His mission was straightforward. Gather information on recent troop movements, identify potential targets, and monitor the activities of key imperial figures. Stay close to Leone, Naginda instructed as they departed. Her imperial arm, Lionel, enhances her senses. She knows the capital's underworld better than anyone. The journey back was quicker than their departure had been, with Leone steady. A brisk pace through forest paths that seemed invisible to untrained eyes. By midday, they reached the outskirts of the capital. We'll enter separately, Leone explained, her demeanor shifting to all business. The gates are under heavier guard since the theater incident. Lubbock will go first, then Tatsumi. Naruto and I will enter through the southern tunnel. There's a tunnel, Naruto asked. Leone winked. One of many. Night Raid has been operating in the capital for years. We've established numerous entry points. The southern tunnel proved to be a narrow passage beneath the city wall. Disguised as a drainage culvert but extending far beyond its apparent purpose. It brought them up into an abandoned building in the slums, where Leone quickly changed into civilian clothing. Put these on, she instructed, tossing Naruto a bundle of clothes. Your orange outfit is too distinctive. Naruto complied, donning the plain brown tunic and trousers. The disguise was completed with a cap that covered his bright blonde hair. Now you look like just another laborer, Leone approved, her own transformation even more dramatic. Gone was the wild-haired fighter. In her place stood a seemingly respectable young woman in modest dress. I'll be playing the role of a merchant's assistant today. What's our first objective? Naruto asked as they exited the building. The taverns near the barracks, Leone replied. Soldiers drink, soldiers talk. We need to know if the Empire is planning another campaign, and where they're deploying their strongest units. The taverns in question were rowdy. Establishments where off-duty soldiers gathered to escape the rigid discipline of imperial service. Leone navigated these spaces with practiced ease, sliding into conversations, offering drinks, and extracting information while appearing to do nothing more than flirt harmlessly. Naruto found himself impressed by her skill. He remained more observer than participant, his unfamiliarity with Imperial military structure making him less effective at this kind of infiltration. Instead, he focused on memorizing faces, ranks, and locations mentioned in conversations. By late afternoon, they had read significant intelligence. 3 legions were being repositioned to the northern borders, 2 prominent generals had been recalled to the capital for a special assignment, and, most importantly, Esdeath was planning something that had the regular army officers nervous. They keep mentioning a tournament, Naruto noted as they left the 4th tavern. Leone nodded thoughtfully. The Empire occasion. Ally hosts fighting tournaments to identify talented individuals. Given what we know about Esdeath's interest in you, she might be using this to flush out other powerful fighters. Or to draw me out specifically, Naruto suggested. Either way, it warrants investigation. Leone led them toward the market district. We're meeting Lubbock at the bookshop. He's been gathering information from the nobility's gossip circles. The bookshop was a modest establishment with a surprisingly diverse collection. Lubbock was already inside, browsing casually while actually monitoring the conversations of wealthy patrons in the rare book section. Anything? Leone asked quietly as they approached. Lubbock shook his head subtly. Nothing concrete, but lots of whispers. The Prime Minister is apparently anxious about something, or someone. He's increased his personal security and is restricting access to the inner palace. Since when? Naruto asked. Since reports of a mysterious blonde stranger started circulating. Lubbock replied with a pointed look. That was interesting. The Prime Minister's reaction suggested he viewed Naruto as a threat, despite having no direct interactions with him. "Where's Tatsumi?" Leone asked. "Scanning the shop. Reconnaissance at the palace," Lubbock answered. "He's watching the main gates to track who enters and exits. Should rendezvous with us at sunset." Leone nodded. "Then we have time for one more stop. I want to check in with an informant in the entertainment district." As they exited the bookshop, Naruto's enhanced senses detected a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The civilians in the market were growing tense, conversations hushing as attention turned toward the main street. "Something's happening," he murmured to Leone. She nodded, her own heightened senses picking up the change. "Imperial procession. Important one, based on how the guards are clearing the street." They positioned themselves among the gathering crowd, blending in as curious onlookers. Minutes later, a column of elite soldiers appeared, surrounding an ornate carriage. The soldiers wore distinctive white uniforms with blue accents, Esdeath's personal guards. "Speak of the devil," Lubbock muttered. The carriage passed close enough that Naruto could see its occupant clearly. Esdeath sat with regal posture, her expression coldly imperial as she surveyed the crowd. For the briefest moment, her ice-blue eyes seemed to pause on him, though his disguise should have rendered him anonymous among hundreds of spectators. A chill ran down his spine when her lips curved into the SLIGH test smile before the carriage continued on. "Did she?" Leone began. "Yes," Naruto confirmed. "She recognized me." Lubbock swore softly. "That's not possible. Your disguise is perfect, and we're among hundreds of people." "Esdeath is a hunter," Leone said grimly. "She can track prey across continents by the slightest traces. If she's already memorized Naruto's essence, for lack of a better term, a simple disguise won't fool her. This complicated matters. If Esdeath could identify him at a glance regardless of disguise, operating within the capital became significantly more dangerous." "We should move," Naruto decided. "If she recognized me, she might send soldiers to investigate." They slipped away from the market, taking a circuitous route toward the entertainment district. Along the way, Naruto noticed increased military presence throughout the capital. More patrols, more checkpoints, more soldiers watching the crowds with suspicious eyes. "The Empire's preparing for something," Leone observed as they navigated around a newly established checkpoint. "This level of security isn't normal, even after a night raid assassination." Her informant turned out to be a middle-aged woman, who ran an upscale brothel frequented by imperial officials. Leone was welcomed warmly, her disguise apparently unnecessary here. "Madame Louisa is an old friend," she explained to Naruto as they were led to a private room. "Her girls hear things no spy could ever access." The madam herself was a striking woman with shrewd eyes and an air of complete control. She greeted Leone with genuine affection before turning her assessing gaze on Naruto. "So this is the one causing all the commotion," she said, her voice rich and cultured. "He's certainly as handsome as the rumors suggest." Naruto maintained a neutral expression, though he was surprised at being so easily identified. Louisa chuckled at his reaction. "Don't worry, young man. I have no loyalty to the Empire. They may pay for my girl's time, but they've never earned my respect." She gestured for them to sit. "You're here about the tournament, I assume?" Leone nodded. "What do you know?" "It's Esdeath's project, announced just yesterday. A martial arts competition, open to all fighters, with a prize of 10,000 gold pieces." Louisa poured tea for her guests. "The real prize, of course, is a position in Esdeath's new Special Forces unit. She's personally selecting the members." "When?" Naruto asked. 3 days from now, in the Imperial Arena." Louisa's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "The curious thing is the timing. Esdeath only proposed this after the incident at the theater. It's almost as if she's creating an opportunity for someone specific to approach her openly," Leone finished. "Exactly." Louisa sipped her tea. "Now, why would the Empire's strongest general go to such lengths to make contact with someone, when she could simply hunt them down?" The implication was clear. Esdeath was offering Naruto a public, relatively safe way to meet her, an alternative to the chase she could otherwise initiate. "There's more," Louisa continued. "Prime Minister Honest is unusually interested in this tournament. He's assigned his personal guards to oversee security, not Esdeath's men." "He doesn't trust her," Lubbock deduced. Or he has his own agenda for the event. This aligned with what they'd learned earlier. The Prime Minister viewed Naruto as a threat, while Esdeath saw him as a potential ally or asset. The tournament was becoming a convergence point for multiple schemes. "Thank you, Louisa," Leone said, rising. "As always, your information is invaluable." The madam waved a dismissive hand. Seeing that bloated tyrant honest squirm as payment enough. "But Leone," she added, her tone growing serious, "be careful. The empire is changing. Honest fears something or someone, and fear makes even corpulent sycophants dangerous." Outside, the sun was setting, bathing the capital in golden light tea. Had did little to soften its harsh realities. They made their way to the rendezvous point, a small tea house near the western gate, where Tatsumi waited impatiently. "You're late," he greeted them, then lowered his voice. "Something big is happening. I saw General Budo returning to the palace. He's been on the northern front for months." Leone whistled softly. "The great general himself. This is significant. Budo rarely leaves the emperor's side unless it's for major military operations." "That's not all," Tatsumi continued. "There are rumors among the palace servants about a special project in the dungeons. Something to do with enhanced soldiers." Naruto frowned. "What kind of enhancement?" "Unknown," Tatsumi admitted. "But they're supposedly being prepared for a specific purpose, to counter an external threat." The pieces were beginning to align. The Prime Minister viewed Naruto as this external threat and was developing countermeasures. Meanwhile, Esdeath was pursuing her own agenda regarding him, potentially in conflict with her supposed master's wishes. "We need more information," Naruto decided, "about both the tournament and these enhanced soldiers." Leone nodded in agreement. "The tournament is public. We can observe it directly. But the dungeon project requires infiltration." "I can handle that," Naruto said confidently. 3 sets of surprised eyes turned to him. "The Palace dungeons are the most heavily guarded location in the capital," Lubbock protested. "Even Night Raid hasn't attempted direct infiltration. I have abilities specifically suited for infiltration," Naruto explained. "And I need to know what they're developing to counter me." Leone studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Tonight, then. The changing of the palace guard happens at midnight. That's our window." They spent the remaining daylight hours finalizing their plan. Lubbock would provide perimeter security with his imperial arm, Cross-Tail, creating a web of near-invisible wires to detect and delay any response. Tatsumi would remain as a lookout and emergency extraction if needed. Leone and Naruto would enter the dungeons together, with Leone guiding and Naruto handling the actual infiltration. As night fell, they moved into position near the palace's eastern wall, where the dungeon levels extended partially above ground. The Imperial Guards patrolled in precise patterns, their D.I.S. zipline a testament to the regime's efficiency if nothing else. "Midnight in 3 minutes, Lubbock whispered, his fingers manipulating the thin wires of his imperial arm. "Get ready." Leone activated her imperial arm, Lionel. The transformation was subtle but impressive, her hair growing wilder, her fingernails extending into claws, her features taking on feline characteristics. "My senses are at maximum. No one within 100 meters that isn't on the patrol route." Naruto formed a hand sign, focusing his chakra. "Shadow clone jutsu," he whispered. With a soft puff of smoke, an exact duplicate appeared beside him. Tatsumi's eyes widened. "That's still amazing to see. The clone will create a distraction on the western wall," Naruto explained. "Nothing dangerous, just enough to draw attention for a few minutes." Right on schedule, bells chimed midnight from the palace tower. Guards began the ceremonial changing of posts, creating a brief window of controlled chaos as positions transferred. "Now," Leone urged. Naruto's clone dashed away, heading for the western wall. Moments later, shouts erupted from that direction as the clone led guards on a brief, noisy chase before deliberately disappearing. "That's our cue," Leone grinned, her enhanced muscles coiling before she leapt to the top of the eastern wall in a single bound. Naruto followed, using chakra to adhere to the vertical surface. They crossed the outer courtyard in shadows, avoiding the remaining guards who were distracted by the commotion. A service entrance led them into the palace proper, and from there, Leone navigated the labyrinthine corridors with the confidence of someone who had studied the layout extensively. "Dungeons are 3 levels down," she whispered, leading him down a servant's staircase. The special project should be in the restricted section at the lowest level. The dungeons themselves were eerily quiet, most cells empty or housing prisoners who slept the fitful sleep of the condemned. Leone moved silently, her enhanced senses allowing her to detect guards long before they came into view. At the entrance to the restricted section, they encountered their first significant obstacle. A heavy iron door guarded by 4 elite soldiers. "We can't take them without raising an alarm," Leone whispered, pulling back into a shadowed alcove. "And I don't see a key." Naruto considered their options. "I don't need the door," he finally said. Leone raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Instead of answering verbally, Naruto activated his shadow clone jutsu again, creating a single duplicate. Y clone will transform into a rat and scout ahead. It can pass through the smallest openings, and when it dispels, I'll gain all its memories and knowledge. "Useful trick," Leone commented, clearly impressed. "How long will it take?" "Not long. Just watch the guards while I concentrate." The clone transformed into a small brown rat and scurried through a drainage grate near the floor. Once it was through, Naruto closed his eyes, focusing on maintaining the connection while the clone explored. Minutes passed in tense silence. Leone kept watch, her enhanced hearing tracking the guards' movements beyond their hiding place. Finally, Naruto opened his eyes, a troubled expression crossing his face. "They're experimenting with blood," he said quietly. "Mixing it with something that looks like essence extracted from danger beasts." "Blood? Whose blood?" Leone pressed. "I don't know, but it's stored in special containers marked with my description." Naruto's frown deepened. "They must have collected it from the theater after the confrontation with Esdeath. My blood, or at least traces of it." Leone's expression darkened. "The Prime Minister is trying to create soldiers with your abilities. Or at least immunities to them. There's more," Naruto continued. "They have records there, research notes on dimensional energy. They've been monitoring unusual energy signatures throughout the capital since my arrival. So they know you're not from this world," Leone concluded. Naruto nodded. "And they're trying to weaponize that knowledge." The clone's exploration had revealed something disturbing. The dungeon project was labeled Operation Counterbalance, and bore the personal seal of Prime Minister Honest. This wasn't merely research, it was a direct response to Naruto's presence. "We need to tell the boss about this," Leone decided. "If they're creating enhanced soldiers specifically to counter you, we need to adjust our strategies." They retreated the way they had come, Leone's senses ensuring they avoided patrols. The extraction proceeded smoothly until they reached the outer courtyard, where an unexpected development awaited them. Esdeath stood alone in the moonlight, directly in their path to the wall. "I thought I sensed an interesting presence," she said calmly, as though encountering intruders in the Imperial Palace was an everyday occurrence. "Leone of Night Raid, and..." Her eyes found Naruto in the shadows. "My elusive quarry." Leone tensed, claws extending fully. "This is bad," she muttered. Naruto stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of Leone. "General Esdeath, out for a midnight stroll." Esdeath's smile was equal parts amused and predatory. "I could summon the entire palace guard with a single shout," she noted conversationally. "Why? I find myself curious about what brought you here tonight." "Just sightseeing," Naruto replied with deliberate lightness. "In the dungeons." Esdeath raised an elegant eyebrow. "How unusual. Most tourists prefer the gardens." The tension stretched between them, Esdeath making no move to attack or raise an alarm, simply studying them with undisguised interest. "What do you want?" Naruto finally asked directly. "Currently, to understand why you're investigating the Prime Minister's pet project rather than preparing for my tournament." Esdeath took a step closer, her gaze intensifying. "You were planning to participate, aren't you? I designed it specifically with you in mind." "I noticed," Naruto acknowledged. "Why not simply issue a direct challenge if you want to face me?" Esdeath laughed softly. "Because this isn't about combat, impressive as your skills may be. The tournament provides a legitimate path for you to approach me publicly, to join my team without the stigma of being captured." Her eyes flicked to Leone. "A more attractive option than aligning with terrorists, surely." Leone growled low in her throat. "We're only terrorists to those who benefit from tyranny." "Semantics," Esdeath dismissed. "The point remains. I'm offering him a position of power, recognition, and legitimacy. She refocused on Naruto. What are you offering him? Night Raid. The life of a hunted criminal. Freedom to choose. Leone shot back. Something your empire doesn't value. Esdeath's expression cooled further. Freedom is an illusion. Power is the only reality. She returned her attention to Naruto. You have until the tournament to consider your options. After that, our next meeting won't be so cordial. With that warning delivered, she simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the palace without raising an alarm. Leone stared after her, bewildered. What just happened? She's playing a longer game, Naruto said thoughtfully. She could have captured or killed us, but she chose to let us go. She wants me to join her willingly. They didn't wait to question their good fortune, quickly scaling the wall and rejoining Lubbock and Tatsumi, who had been watching the encounter with bated breath. I thought we were done for when she appeared, Tatsumi admitted as they retreated from the palace grounds. So did I, Leone agreed. Esdeath doesn't show mercy, ever. Naruto remained thoughtful as they made their way back to the abandoned building that served as their temporary safe house. Esdeath's actions contradicted everything he'd heard about her ruthless nature. She had deliberately let them escape, had even warned him rather than ambushing him. She's interested in you, Leone observed as they settled in for what remained of the night. Not just as a potential soldier or opponent. There was something personal in the way she looked at you. Naruto had noticed it too, a predatory interest that went beyond the tactical. That could be useful, he said pragmatically. Or extremely dangerous. Both, Leone declared with certainty. Definitely both. The following morning brought new information. Lubbock, who had slipped out at dawn to check their dead drops, returned with posters announcing the Imperial Tournament in detail. The competition would last 2 days, with preliminary rounds eliminating all but 8 finalists who would compete for the championship and the right to join Esdeath's new team, the Jaegers. It's a trap, Lubbock insisted as they examined the announcements. Esdeath is gathering powerful fighters for something bigger than just hunting Night Raid. But it's also an opportunity, Naruto countered. The tournament will draw participants from across the empire. People with unique abilities, possibly even knowledge about dimensional phenomena. You're not seriously considering entering? Tatsumi asked incredulously. Naruto nodded. I am. It's the fastest way to gather information and potentially make contacts who might help me find a way home. It's suicide, Lubbock protested. The moment you display your abilities publicly, the Prime Minister will know exactly who you are. Operation Counterbalance will target you specifically. I won't show my full capabilities, Naruto assured him. Just enough to advance through the rounds and make contact with other skilled fighters. Leone had been unusually quiet during this exchange, her amber eyes thoughtful. Finally, she spoke. I think he should do it. All eyes turned to her in surprise. We need to know exactly what Esdeath is planning, she explained. NWE need a clearer understanding of this Operation Counterbalance. Naruto entering the tournament serves both purposes. The boss won't like it, Lubbock warned. Leone shrugged. The boss appreciates initiative. Besides, Naruto isn't officially Night Raid. He's free to make his own choices. That settled the matter, at least temporarily. They would return to the hideout to report their findings, and Naruto would prepare for the tournament while they awaited Naginda's response. The journey back through the forest gave Naruto time to reflect on the complex web he found himself entangled in. The Prime Minister viewed him as a threat to be neutralized. Esdeath saw him as a valuable asset to be acquired. Night Raid considered him a potential ally in their revolution. And beyond all these human agendas lay the fundamental problem of his displacement from his own world. You're unusually quiet, Leone observed as they paused at a stream to rest. Naruto glanced at her. Just processing. This world is complicated. Leone laughed softly. All worlds are complicated. People are complicated. She settled beside him on a fallen log. You're thinking about the tournament. Among other things, Naruto skimmed a stone across the water's surface. In my world, I had a clear purpose. Protect my village, my friends. Work toward becoming Hokage, our village leader. Even during the war, the lines between ally and enemy were relatively clear. And here, Leone prompted when he fell silent. Here, I'm not sure where I fit. Night Raid fights for the oppressed, but through methods I wouldn't choose. Esdeath offers power and resources, but serves a corrupt regime. And somewhere in all of this, I need to find a way home. Leone studied him with unusual seriousness. Maybe you don't need to fit perfectly into any existing group. Maybe you create your own path, taking allies where you find them. It was surprisingly insightful advice, reminiscent of something Jiraiya might have said. Naruto found himself looking at Leone with renewed appreciation. Beneath her brash exterior lay a perceptive mind and a core of unwavering principles. That's actually helpful, he admitted. Leone grinned, her usual playfulness returning. I have my moments. She stretched, the movement emphasizing her athletic form. Besides, having you in the tournament gives us an inside perspective we wouldn't otherwise have. Using me as a spy? Naruto asked, half joking. Using your unique position to mutual advantage, Leone corrected. You're not Night Raid, but you're not Imperial either. You exist in a space between, which makes you valuable to both sides. She wasn't wrong. His outsider status provided opportunities that established players lacked. By maintaining independence while forming selective alliances, he could navigate this world's politics while pursuing his own goals. They reached the Night Raid hideout by evening, where Naginda received their report with a mixture of concern and calculation. The revelation of Operation Counterbalance particularly troubled her. If Honest is developing soldiers specifically designed to counter your abilities, he views you as a significant threat, she observed. Which means he knows more about your capabilities than he should, given your limited interactions with Imperial forces. The question is how, Lubbock added. Even with blood samples, they shouldn't be able to analyze his powers so quickly. Unless they've encountered something similar before, Naginda suggested. Perhaps your type of energy isn't entirely unknown in our world's history. This was a possibility Naruto hadn't considered. If chakra or something analogous had previously existed in this world, it might explain the Prime Minister's accelerated research. Regarding the tournament, Naginda continued. Turning to Naruto, I understand your reasoning, but the risks are substantial. Once you appear publicly, Honest will undoubtedly connect you to the mysterious stranger from the theater incident. I'm counting on it, Naruto replied. Let him show his hand. The more I understand about his countermeasures, the better I can avoid them. Naginda studied him thoughtfully, then nodded. Very well. Enter the tournament, but maintain the appearance of a skilled fighter, not a one-man army. We'll provide backup. Leone and Akame will observe from the crowd, ready to extract you if necessary. It was a reasonable compromise. Naruto would gain access to the information and contacts he sought, while Night Raid would gather intelligence on Esdeath's new team and Prime Minister's response to Naruto's public appearance. The following 2 days were spent in preparation. Naruto trained with various Night Raid members, familiarizing himself with their fighting styles and the capabilities of Imperial arms in general. He was careful not to reveal his full arsenal of techniques, keeping his most powerful abilities in reserve. Leone proved to be a particularly challenging sparring partner. Her Imperial arm enhanced her already formidable physical abilities to near superhuman levels, allowing her to match Naruto's base speed and strength without him accessing Kurama's chakra. You're holding back, she accused after their third session, breathing hard but grinning fiercely. So are you, Naruto countered, equally winded. The physical exertion felt good after days of tension and planning. Leone laughed, wiping sweat from her brow. Fair point. We all have our secrets. She tossed him a water flask. But seriously, how much of your power have you actually shown since arriving here? Naruto considered the question. Maybe 15%, 20 at most. Leone's eyes widened. That's significant. You took down Esdeath's 3 beasts without breaking a sweat at what? 10% of your capacity. Something like that, Naruto acknowledged. Though raw power isn't everything. This world has unique dangers I'm still learning about. Like Imperial arms, Leone nodded. Speaking of which, how do you plan to explain your abilities in the tournament? People will ask questions when you start making copies of yourself. It was a valid concern. Is shadow clone jutsu and other ninja techniques would attract attention in a competition otherwise focused on martial arts and Imperial arms. I'll say I have a rare ability from a distant region, Naruto decided. Not technically a lie, just not the whole truth. The evening before the tournament, Night Raid gathered for a final briefing. The plan was straightforward. Naruto would enter under an alias, progressing through the preliminary rounds while attracting minimal attention. Leone and Akame would observe from the crowd, while Lubbock monitored the imperial officials present. If anything went wrong, they would create a distraction allowing Naruto to escape in the confusion. Remember, Naginata cautioned, your primary objective is information gathering, not winning the tournament. Observe the other competitors, especially any who display unusual abilities that might relate to dimensional travel. Naruto nodded, and if Esdeath approaches me directly, engage cautiously, Naginata advised. She's offering you something she believes you want. Discover what she knows without committing yourself to her service. After the briefing, Naruto found a quiet spot on the hideout's roof to meditate. The night sky above was similar to his own worlds, yet subtly different, the constellations unfamiliar, the moon's light carrying a slightly different quality. Missing home. Leone's voice came from behind him. Naruto opened his eyes as she settled beside him, thinking about what might be happening there. Time could be passing differently. My friends might be searching for me, or, he let the thought trail off. Or they might think you're dead, Leone finished softly. That would be hard. Naruto nodded. After a moment, he asked, do you ever think about life after the revolution? What you'll do when the fighting is over? Leone seemed surprised by the question. Sometimes, I'd like to return to the slums where I grew up, help rebuild. Create something better than what we're tearing down. She glanced at him curiously. In my world, I wanted to become Hokage, the leader of my village, Naruto explained. To protect everyone, to be acknowledged. He looked up at the unfamiliar stars. Here, I'm just trying to find my way back. But I can't help caring about what happens to this place too. Leone studied his profile, her expression unreadable in the moonlight. For someone from another world, you fit in here pretty well. Is that a compliment or a concern? Naruto asked with a small smile. Both, Leone admitted. You adapt quickly, connect with people easily. It's a valuable skill. She paused, then added more seriously, but it can also be dangerous. Caring about a world that isn't yours might complicate your goal of returning home. It was an insightful observation, striking closer to Naruto's own concerns than he'd expected. The longer he remained in this world, the more connections he formed, the more difficult a clean departure would become. I've never been good at not caring, he said finally. Leone's smile held a touch of sadness. That's what makes you different from most powerful people in this empire. They only care about themselves. She stood, stretching. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without fatigue slowing you down. As she turned to leave, Naruto called after her, Leone. Thanks for trusting me, even when you had no reason to. She looked back, her amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. I'm a good judge of character. It's kept me alive this long. With a casual wave, she disappeared back into the hideout. Dawn arrived with a sense of anticipation. Naruto dressed in the outfit provided by Night Raid, simple fighting clothes that wouldn't attract undue attention but allowed freedom of movement. No headband, no orange. Just another competitor seeking glory in the Imperial tournament. Remember your cover story, Lubbock reminded him as they prepared to depart. You're Menma, a wandering fighter from the Eastern Territories. You learned your techniques from a hermit master. Keep it vague but believable. The alias brought a nostalgic smile to Naruto's face. Menma had been the name of his counterpart in an alternate reality he'd once visited. It seemed fitting to borrow it now, in this different world. They traveled separately to the capital, using different entry points to avoid being connected. Naruto arrived at the Imperial Arena shortly after it opened for competitor registration, joining hundreds of fighters from across the empire. The registration process was efficient if impersonal. Naruto provided his alias and claimed origin, was assigned a preliminary block, and directed to a waiting area with other competitors. The atmosphere was tense with pre-competition energy, fighters sizing each other up. Some boasting loudly while others maintained silent focus. Naruto found a quiet corner to observe, noting the diversity of styles represented. Most competitors appeared to be conventional martial artists, but a significant minority carried unusual weapons or displayed physical traits suggesting imperial arm enhancement. First time competing? Asked a cheerful voice. Naruto turned to find a young man about his age with spiky brown hair and an open, friendly face. Despite his casual demeanor, the way he moved suggested significant combat training. Is it that obvious? Naruto replied with a small smile. The young man laughed. You're too relaxed. Most first-timers are either nervous wrecks or trying too hard to look intimidating. He extended a hand. I'm Wave, former Imperial Navy. Naruto accepted the handshake. Menma, Eastern Territories. Eastern Territories, huh, don't get many competitors from out that way. Wave leaned against the wall beside Naruto. What brings you to the capital for this particular tournament? The prize money, Naruto answered with the planned cover story. My village needs it. Wave nodded understandingly. Noble cause. Most are here for personal glory or to catch General Esdeath's attention. You're not? Naruto asked, sensing an opportunity to gather information. Already serve the Empire, Wave explained. Zhu, participating to test myself against different fighting styles. The Navy doesn't get much land combat experience. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement calling the first preliminary block to the arena floor. Naruto's block would compete third, giving him time to observe the tournament format. The preliminaries proved to be a series of battle royales, with 20 fighters per block entering the arena simultaneously. The last 8 standing advanced to the next round. Victory could be achieved through knockout, submission, or ring out. Killing was technically prohibited, though the enforcement of this rule seemed lax at best. When Naruto's block was called, he entered the arena with 19 other competitors, ranging from hardened mercenaries to provincial champions. The crowd roared with excitement. Thousands of spectators filling the massive circular stadium. In a special box above the commoners sat imperial dignitaries, including Prime Minister Honest himself, a corpulent man whose appearance matched his reputation for excess. Esdeath was conspicuously absent from the official box, though Naruto sensed her presence somewhere in the arena. She was watching, but not from where everyone expected. The signal to begin came with a thunderous gong. Immediately, the arena erupted into chaos as fighters engaged one another. Naruto deliberately held back, avoiding direct confrontation while studying his opponent's techniques. Most relied on conventional fighting styles, effective but unremarkable. 3 competitors stood out. A massive man wielding what appeared to be an imperial arm that increased his physical strength exponentially, a woman whose movements suggested formal military training, and a hooded figure who moved with unusual fluidity, almost as though gravity affected them differently. Naruto avoided these 3 initially, focusing on eliminating less threatening opponents with minimal force. A precise strike to pressure points here, a quick sweep, taking feet from under an attacker there. He maintained awareness of his surroundings at all times, careful not to reveal techniques that would immediately identify him. The crowd's reaction to his fighting style was interesting, initial dismissal giving way to growing appreciation as they recognized the efficiency of his movements. He wasn't putting on a show like some competitors, but his technical precision was unmistakable to knowledgeable observers. As the number of active fighters dwindled, Naruto finally engaged with the stronger opponents. The massive man fell to a combination of misdirection and leverage, his own strength used against him. The military woman proved more challenging, her disciplined style suggesting Imperial Army Special Forces training. Naruto respected her skill, enough to use slightly more of his true abilities, moving just fast enough to slip past her guard and deliver a stunning blow to her solar plexus. That left the hooded figure, who had been systematic, eliminating opponents throughout the melee. As they faced each other across the now cleared arena floor, Naruto felt a strange sense of familiarity in the other fighter's stance. Interesting technique, the hooded figure commented. Voice deliberately pitched to be unidentifiable. Not Imperial Army. Not from the tribes either. Something older. Naruto maintained a neutral expression. I could say the same about your style. Without warning, the figure attacked, moving with speed that would have surprised most opponents. Naruto met the advance with matching quickness, their exchange of blows creating a rhythm that spoke of years of similar training. Neither landed a solid hit, each reading the other's movements with uncanny precision. After 30 seconds of this testing exchange, the hooded figure disengaged. Chuckling softly, most enlightening. I look forward to our next encounter. Menma. The way they emphasized his alias suggested knowledge, or at least suspicion, of his true identity. Before Naruto could pursue this, officials announced the end of the preliminary, with exactly 8 competitors remaining in their block. As he left the arena floor, Naruto scanned the crowd, quickly locating Leone and Akame among the spectators. Leone gave him a subtle nod of approval. His performance had been effective without being too revealing, just another skilled fighter, not an otherworldly threat. The tournament's structure meant the remaining rounds would take place the following day, giving competitors time to recover. Naruto used this opportunity to observe the other blocks, identifying potential opponents and any fighters displaying unusual abilities. By evening, the field had been narrowed to 64 competitors across 8 blocks. Naruto had qualified comfortably, as had Wave and the mysterious hooded figure. The semi-finals and finals would be individual matches rather than melees, with the 8 block winners competing for the championship. As Naruto prepared to leave the arena, an Imperial Guard approached him. "Competitor Menma, General Esdeath requests your presence at the Champions Banquet tonight. All block winners are invited." This was unexpected but not unwelcome. The banquet would provide access to the other skilled fighters and potentially Imperial officials with knowledge relevant to his search. "I would be honored," Naruto replied with appropriate formality. The guard provided details for the event, which would be held at the Imperial Palace itself. As the messenger departed, Leone appeared beside Naruto, having worked her way through the dispersing crowd. "A private invitation to the palace," she murmured. "Convenient or concerning?" "Both," Naruto replied quietly. "But it's an opportunity we can't ignore." Leone nodded. "Agreed. But be careful. The palace is Honest's domain, whatever special interest Esdeath has in you." "I'll maintain my cover," Naruto assured her. "And keep my senses alert for any trap." They parted ways, Leone returning to Night Raid's safe house while Naruto prepared for the evening's event. He couldn't help but feel a growing anticipation. The tournament was unfolding exactly as they'd hoped, riveting access to information and connections without fully exposing his identity or abilities. The Champions Banquet was held in a magnificent hall within the palace, crystal chandeliers illuminating marble floors and gilded columns. The contrast with the poverty Naruto had witnessed in the capital's outer districts was stark and disturbing. Here, the Empire's elite dined on exotic delicacies while citizens starved mere kilometers away. The 64 qualifying competitors were joined by Imperial officials, military officers, and nobles eager to associate with the tournament's rising stars. Naruto entered cautiously, extending his senses to detect any immediate threat. Nothing obvious presented itself, though the atmosphere carried undercurrents of intrigue beneath the festive surface. Wave spotted him immediately, waving him over to a group of competitors engaged in animated conversation. "Menma, congratulations on qualifying," the Navy officer greeted him warmly. "That was impressive work in the arena." Naruto accepted the praise with appropriate modesty. "You weren't bad yourself. The way you handled that axe wielder was skillful." Wave introduced him to several other competitors, most of whom received Naruto with professional courtesy if not outright friendliness. The conversation flowed naturally around fighting techniques and predictions for the following day's matches. "Has anyone spotted General Esdeath?" one fighter asked. "She's supposedly hosting this event, but I haven't seen her. Probably making a grand entrance later," another suggested. "The general has a flair for the dramatic." Naruto used the opportunity to gather information, asking casual questions about the tournament's history and the nature of the special team Esdeath was forming. Most competitors knew only rumors, but a few offered insights that aligned with what Night Raid had already discovered. "They're calling it the Jaegers," a veteran fighter explained. "An elite unit answering directly to Esdeath. Not the regular military chain of command. Supposedly tasked with hunting down Night Raid, but everyone knows it's more than that." "More," Naruto prompted. The man lowered his voice. "Word is, the Prime Minister and General Esdeath have different visions for the Empire's future. This team could be her power base if those differences ever come to a head." This confirmed Naginda's suspicion that Esdeath was playing a deeper game than mere loyalty to the current regime. The Ice General had ambitions beyond serving as the Prime Minister's attack dog. As the evening progressed, Naruto circulated through the hall, engaging briefly with various groups while maintaining awareness of his surroundings. He noticed the hooded figure from his preliminary block standing alone near a window, observing the proceedings with evident disinterest. Curiosity piqued, Naruto approached. Not one for social gatherings. The figure turned slightly. I prefer to observe rather than participate in performances. And this is a performance? Naruto asked. Isn't everything in the capital? The hood shifted as the figure surveyed the room. Everyone playing assigned roles, from the noble's pretending at generosity to the fighters pretending at loyalty. There was something familiar in the cynical assessment, reminding Naruto of conversations with Sasuke during their more philosophical moments. And what role are you playing? He asked directly. The hooded figure seemed to smile beneath the concealing fabric. Currently, Scout. Before Naruto could question this cryptic response, they continued. You should know that you're being watched. Not just by me, but by several parties with varying interests. Naruto had already sensed the attention directed his way, subtle observations from imperial officers. More obvious scrutiny from competitors assessing potential opponents. But the hooded figure seemed to be referring to something more specific. Any particular watchers I should be concerned about? He asked casually. The Prime Minister has agents circulating among the guests. They're paying special attention to fighters with unusual techniques. The figure tilted their head slightly. Like yours. So Honest was already making connections. Naruto had expected this but hoped for more time before drawing direct attention. Thanks for the warning, he said sincerely. Consider it professional courtesy. The hooded figure straightened suddenly. She's here. A hush fell over the hall as the main doors opened to admit General Esdeath. She cut an imposing figure in her military uniform. Ice blue hair contrasting sharply with the pristine white fabric. Her presence commanded immediate attention, conversation stopping mid-sentence as all eyes turned toward her. Esdeath surveyed the room with cool detachment before speaking. Congratulations to all who have qualified for tomorrow's finals. You represent the Empire's finest martial talent, and regardless of the ultimate outcome, you have earned recognition. Her gaze swept across the assembled fighters, pausing briefly, deliberately, on Naruto before continuing. Tomorrow's champion will receive not only gold but the opportunity to join the Jaegers, my personal squad tasked with maintaining the Empire's security. This is no small honor. The Jaegers will stand as the pinnacle of imperial power, answering directly to me. The emphasis on her personal authority was subtle but unmistakable. This team would be Esdeath's creation, not the Prime Minister's. Enjoy the evening's hospitality, she concluded. Tomorrow, W will test your limits in ways this morning's preliminaries only suggested. With that, she moved into the crowd, immediately surrounded by sycophantic nobles and officials seeking her attention. Despite this entourage, Naruto noticed her trajectory was gradually bringing her in his direction. Incoming, the hooded figure murmured. I'll leave you to it. They slipped away, disappearing into the crowd with remarkable stealth. Naruto maintained his position, waiting as Esdeath methodically worked her way toward him, disentangling herself from admirers with practiced efficiency. When she finally stood before him, the surrounding guests discreetly withdrew, sensing the general's desire for a more private conversation. Menma of the Eastern Territories, Esdeath greeted him, her voice carrying a hint of amusement at the alias. Your performance today was restrained. Effective, but far below your capabilities. Naruto met her gaze steadily. I didn't need to show everything in the preliminaries. No, she agreed. You didn't. Just as you don't need to maintain this charade when we both know who you really are. The directness of her approach was both refreshing and concerning. Eth clearly saw no point in pretending she didn't recognize him, despite his altered appearance and name. The tournament provides a structure, Naruto replied carefully. A legitimate way for fighters to demonstrate their skills without political complications. Esdeath's smile was knowing, indeed, and a way for someone in a complicated position to approach the Empire's hierarchy without immediately being labeled an enemy. She took a glass of wine from a passing servant. Tell me, have you considered my offer? Partnership is a significant commitment, Naruto said neutrally. Especially, why when I know so little about your ultimate goals? A fair concern. Esdeath gestured toward a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Perhaps we could speak more privately. It was potentially dangerous, but also the opportunity he'd been seeking. Naruto nodded, following her to the balcony where the cool evening air provided relief from the banquet's stuffiness. Palace guards stationed nearby, withdrew to a respectful distance at Esdeath's silent command. "You're not from this world," she stated without preamble once they were alone. Naruto concealed his surprise at her directness. "What makes you say that? Your energy signature is unlike anything in Imperial records. Your techniques follow principles that contradict our understanding of Imperial arms. And," she studied him intently, "there's something in your eyes. You see this empire as a stranger would, without the conditioning of having grown up within its influence." Her perception was unnervingly accurate. Naruto decided matching her directness was the most effective approach. "And if I'm not from this world, what then?" he asked. "Would that make me a threat to be eliminated, or a resource to be exploited?" "Neither," Esdeath replied with unexpected sincerity. "It would make you something far more valuable, a perspective untainted by our history, our limitations." She turned to gaze out over the moonlit gardens. He Prime Minister sees only threats to his power. I see opportunities for the Empire's evolution. Evolution toward what? Naruto pressed. Esdeath's expression grew contemplative. Strength. True strength. Not the hollow pageantry of the current regime. Honest maintains power through corruption and manipulation. The Emperor is a child playing at rulership. The military enforces laws that serve the privileged while oppressing the masses. She looked back at him. It's inefficient. Wasteful of potential. This was not the justification of tyranny Naruto had expected. Esdeath spoke of systemic problems with genuine dissatisfaction, though her concerns seemed more practical than moral. "And your solution?" he asked, genuinely curious. "A meritocracy of power," she answered immediately. "Position based on ability, not birth or wealth. Leadership earned through demonstrable strength, not inheritance or political maneuvering." Her eyes gleamed with conviction. "The Jaegers are the first step. A team selected purely for ability. Answerable only to proven strength." It was a vision with elements Naruto could actually respect, despite its obvious flaws. Esdeath valued genuine capability over arbitrary hierarchy, even if her definition of strength remained troublingly narrow. "And where do I fit in this vision?" Naruto asked. "As a catalyst," Esdeath replied. "Someone whose very existence challenges assumptions, forces new thinking." She stepped closer, her intense gaze locked with his. "You possess power beyond Imperial arms, beyond danger beasts. You could help reshape this empire into something worthy of its potential." Quote, the offer was tempting in its grandiosity. Not merely a position of authority, but the opportunity to fundamentally transform a corrupt system. Yet Naruto recognized the dangers inherent in Esdeath's philosophy, her apparent indifference to suffering, her worship of strength above compassion. "And the current methods?" he asked pointedly. "The executions of civilians, the slaughter of innocents to maintain control." Esdeath's expression didn't change. "Inefficient and unnecessary in a properly structured society. Fear is a crude tool, effective only in the short term. True loyalty comes from respect for demonstrable power used with purpose." It wasn't the moral rejection he'd hoped for, but neither was it enthusiastic endorsement of atrocities. Esdeath seemed to view the Empire's cruelty as a tactical error rather than an ethical failing, problematic, but potentially workable. "There's something else you should know," she continued before Naruto could respond. "The Prime Minister is developing countermeasures specifically targeting your abilities. Operation Counterbalance." Naruto kept his expression neutral despite his surprise at her knowledge of the classified project. "Why tell me this?" "Because Honest and I have different plans for the Empire's future," Esdeath stated matter-of-factly. "And different plans for you. He sees you as a threat to eliminate. I see you as a potential ally in creating something better than this decaying institution." Her candor was either a masterful manipulation or genuine strategic transparency. Either way, it provided valuable confirmation of what Night Raid's intelligence had suggested, a growing rift between the Empire's most powerful figures. "I need time to consider," Naruto said finally. "And I have objectives of my own that may not align with yours." "Your search for a way home," Esdeath nodded. "Yes, I'm aware. The Empire possesses ancient texts regarding dimensional phenomena, documents not even included in the records Night Raid has stolen." This was the opening Naruto had been hoping for. "You know about these records?" "I know they exist," Esdeath clarified. "Restricted to the Emperor's personal library. Accessible only to those with his direct authorization." Her smile held genuine amusement. Which I happen to possess, as his most trusted general. The implication was clear: join her. And gain access to information that might provide a path home. It was a powerful incentive, strategically deployed at precisely the right moment. Before Naruto could formulate a response, a commotion from the banquet hall drew their attention. Raised voices suggested some form of disturbance. Esdeath's expression darkened with irritation at the interruption. It seems our conversation must be continued later, she said, moving toward the doors. Consider what I've said. Whatever Night Raid has offered you, I can provide more, including a legitimate path to the knowledge you seek. As they re-entered the hall, Naruto saw Imperial guards surrounding a competitor who appeared to have collapsed. Medics were already attending to the fallen fighter, but the man's condition seemed dire, foam at his mouth. Body contorted in obvious agony. Poison, Esdeath assessed immediately, her military training evident in the quick diagnosis. Clear the room. This could be an assassination attempt. The banquet descended into controlled chaos as guards began evacuating guests while others secured the perimeter. Naruto remained alert, sensing this might be more than a random attack. The Prime Minister himself appeared, surrounded by personal guards. His corpulent form belied a sharp intelligence evident in his eyes as they fixed on the poisoned competitor, then deliberately shifted to Naruto. General Esdeath, Honest called, his voice carrying false concern. How unfortunate that your special event should be marred by such tragedy. Indeed, Minister, Esdeath replied with equal insincerity. Though I wonder how an assassin penetrated palace security to poison a specific competitor. The tension between them was palpable beneath the veneer of professional courtesy. Honest's gaze continued to drift toward Naruto with barely concealed interest. Perhaps it wasn't an assassination, the Prime Minister suggested. Perhaps it was a warning. To those who might consider certain alliances. Esdeath's expression cooled several degrees. An interesting theory, Minister. Though warnings can be misinterpreted, sometimes catastrophically. The exchange, though superficially polite, aried unmistakable undercurrents of threat. Naruto observed the interaction carefully, noting how other officials distanced themselves from this clash of titans, clearly recognizing the danger of being caught between them. As the hall emptied, Naruto made a strategic decision. Rather than remaining to see how the power play unfolded, he slipped away during the confusion, using the skills honed through years of ninja training. Neither Esdeath nor the Prime Minister would appreciate his disappearance, but it maintained his position of neutrality while giving him space to process what he'd learned. Outside the palace, night had fully descended on the capital. Naruto moved quickly through side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Imperial patrols would be searching for anyone leaving the banquet unauthorized. His mind raced with implications of Esdeath's offer and the Prime Minister's obvious hostility. You made a clean exit, observed a familiar voice from the shadows of an alley. Leone stepped into view, her enhanced senses having allowed her to track his departure from the palace. Smart move. That situation was deteriorating fast. You were watching? Naruto asked, impressed despite himself. Leone grinned. Night Raid has eyes everywhere, especially during events like this. We saw the poisoning and the confrontation between Esdeath and Honest. It wasn't subtle, Naruto acknowledged. They're openly positioning against each other now, with me as one of the pieces in play. They continued moving, Leone guiding them toward a safe house different from their previous house location. Standard protocol after a high-profile operation. What did Esdeath want? She asked once they were secure inside. Naruto recounted their conversation, including the general's surprising knowledge of his otherworldly origin and her offer of access to restricted dimensional records. Leone listened attentively, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. She's offering exactly what you need, she observed when he finished. Very convenient. Too convenient, Naruto asked, already considering the same possibility. Leone shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. Esdeath is many things, but she's not known for deception. If she says these records exist and she can provide access, she probably can. The question is what she expects in return, Naruto mused. Partnership has many interpretations. With Esdeath, Leone's expression darkened. It would mean becoming part of her power base against the Prime Minister. Potentially helping her reshape the empire according to her vision. Which might be better than the current regime, Naruto noted, but would still involve a lot of bloodshed. They fell silent, both considering the implications. The tournament had achieved IT's purpose, providing information and potential pathways, but had also complicated Naruto's position significantly. He was now caught between not just 2 but 3 distinct factions: Night Raid's revolution, Esdeath's reformation, and the Prime Minister's existing corrupt empire. What will you do about tomorrow's finals? Leone finally asked. After tonight's incident, security will be heightened. The Prime Minister clearly suspects your true identity. It was a crucial decision point. Continuing in the tournament would maintain his cover as Menma while potentially providing access to Esdeath's offered resources. Withdrawing would protect his identity but sacrifice opportunities for advancement. I'll compete, Naruto decided. But I'll be even more careful about what abilities I display. The basics only, nothing that clearly links me to the stranger from the theater incident. Leone nodded slowly. Risky, but I understand the reasoning. She studied him with unusual intensity. Just be careful around Esdeath. She doesn't form attachments easily, but when she does, they become obsessions. Her interest in you goes beyond your abilities. Naruto had sensed this as well, something in Esdeath's manner that suggested personal interest beneath the strategic calculation. I'll keep that in mind. The night passed restlessly, Naruto's mind processing all he'd learned while preparing for the challenges ahead. By dawn, he had formulated a plan that balanced caution with the necessary assertiveness to maintain his position in the tournament. The Imperial Arena was even more crowded for the finals. Spectators filling every available space to witness the championship matches. Security had indeed been intensified, with Imperial guards checking competitors and spectators alike for weapons or signs of suspicious intent. Naruto passed these inspections easily, maintaining his Menma persona with the practiced ease of a trained infiltrator. The atmosphere among the remaining competitors was tense following the previous night's poisoning incident. One fighter had withdrawn, citing health concerns, a transparent excuse that everyone recognized as fear. The tournament structure had been adjusted accordingly, with the 63 remaining competitors divided into brackets of individual matches. Naruto's first opponent would be a tribal warrior from the northern lands, known for a berserker fighting style that emphasized raw power over technique. Wave approached as Naruto was preparing for his match. Quite a night, huh? Never expected the champion's banquet to include assassination attempts. The capital seems full of surprises, Naruto replied neutrally. Wave lowered his voice. Word is, it wasn't random. The poisoned fighter had been asking questions about restricted Imperial research, something about dimensional energies. This was concerning news. If the Prime Minister was eliminating anyone investigating dimensional phenomena, it suggested both that he knew Abu Naruto's origin and that he was actively suppressing related information. Thanks for the warning, Naruto said sincerely. Wave nodded, a hint of conflict in his expression. Look, I joined the Navy to protect people. Lately, I'm not sure that's what the Empire is actually doing. Just be careful, alright. Politics in the capital can be deadlier than any battlefield. Before Naruto could respond, his name was called for the first match. He entered the arena to enthusiastic applause. His performance in the preliminaries had apparently earned him fans among the spectators. His opponent awaited in the center of the fighting area, a mountain of muscle with tribal tattoos covering his exposed skin. The match began with a ceremonial bow that his opponent ignored, immediately charging with a roar that shook the arena. Naruto sidestepped the initial rush, allowing the berserker's momentum to carry him past. The crowd gasped at his casual evasion of what should have been an overwhelming attack. What followed was a demonstration of technical superiority over raw power. Naruto never struck directly, instead redirecting his opponent's massive strength against him. Each charge was met with a subtle shift in position. Each mighty blow guided away from its target to overextend the attacker. The tribal warrior grew increasingly frustrated, his attacks becoming wilder, less controlled. When victory came, it was almost anticlimactic. The exhausted berserker, having expended his energy in futile charges, finally overextended himself completely. Naruto simply stepped aside and applied press. You were to a specific point on the man's outstretched arm. The massive fighter collapsed, his nervous system temporarily short-circuited by the precise strike. The crowd roared its approval. This was Ting is art form rather than brutality, a display of skill that even untrained spectators could appreciate. Naruto acknowledged the applause with a modest bow before leaving the arena, careful to maintain the demeanor of a serious competitor rather than someone playing to the crowd. His subsequent matches followed a similar pattern. Each opponent presented different challenges: a swordswoman whose speed nearly matched his restrained pace, a martial artist whose technical precision rivaled his own, a masked fighter whose unpredictable style suggested formal assassination training. Naruto adapted to each, revealing just enough skill to secure victory without exposing his full capabilities. By mid-afternoon, he had advanced to the quarterfinals. 8 competitors remained, including both Wave and the mysterious hooded figure from the preliminary round. The atmosphere in the waiting area had changed. These final opponents had observed each other's techniques throughout the day, developing counters and strategies. Impressive consistency, the hooded figure commented as Naruto prepared for his quarterfinal match. You maintain the exact same level of ability in each fight, never showing more than necessary, never less than convincing. You've been watching closely, Naruto observed. As have others. The figure gestured subtly toward the official viewing box, where both Prime Minister Honest and General Esdeath were now present, observing the proceedings with evident interest. Today's champion will have more than prize money to consider. The quarterfinal matches reduced the field to 4: Naruto, Wave, the hooded figure, and a female Imperial Army officer whose efficiency suggested special operations training. The semi-finals would pit Naruto against Wave, while the hooded figure would face the officer. Wave approached Naruto before their match. No hard feelings, whatever the outcome. None, Naruto agreed, genuinely liking the straightforward naval officer. May the best fighter win. Their semifinal became the highlight of the tournament thus far. Wave revealed capabilities he'd carefully concealed in earlier rounds, his Imperial Arm, Grand Chariot, manifesting as a RMOR that enhanced his already impressive physical abilities. The transformation drew gasps from spectators unfamiliar with Imperial arms. Now we can have a real match, Wave grinned through his helmet. No more holding back, Menma, or whoever you really are. The challenge was clear. Wave suspected Naruto's true identity but was offering an honorable contest between equals rather than exposing him. It was a gesture of respect that Naruto appreciated. What followed was a display of combat prowess that had the entire arena captivated. Wave's enhanced strength and speed made him a formidable opponent, forcing Naruto to reveal more of his true abilities than he had planned. Their exchange of techniques, Wave's martial prowess amplified by Grand Chariot, Naruto's shinobi training supplemented by carefully controlled chakra enhancement, created a spectacle of near-superhuman combat. The decisive moment came when Wave attempted his most powerful attack, a diving strike from above the arena, his armor channeling energy into a concentrated point. Naruto met the attack not with a counter but with a technique he judged would appear native to this world, a focused burst of wind chakra that disrupted Wave's trajectory without revealing his more distinctive abilities. Wave crashed into the arena floor, the impact creating a crater despite Naruto's effort to minimize damage. When the dust settled, the naval officer lay defeated but conscious, his armor deactivated by the strain. Naruto approached, extending a hand to help him up. That was an excellent match. Wave accepted the assistance, rising with a wince. You're still holding back, he observed quietly. But that was a genuine challenge. Thank you for that. He clasped Naruto's hand firmly. Win the final. The Empire needs people, like you, those with power who don't abuse it. The sentiment was unexpected from an Imperial officer, suggesting that even within the regime, there were those who recognized its flaws and hoped for better. Naruto nodded his acknowledgement as medical staff helped Wave from the arena. The second semifinal ended quickly and brutally, the hooded figure dispatching the Imperial officer with efficiency that bordered on cruel. There was something performative in the victory, as though the mysterious fighter were sending a message through their methods rather than simply winning. A brief intermission followed, allowing the finalists to recover before their championship match. Naruto used this time to center himself, knowing the final would require perfect balance between displaying enough skill to maintain his cover and concealing abilities that would definitively identify him. In the competitors' waiting area, attendants provided water and basic medical attention for minor injuries. Naruto-sen, said a presence approaching and turned to find Esdeath herself standing before him, having left the official box to speak with him directly. Impressive performance, she commended, her voice carrying genuine appreciation. Particularly against an Imperial arm user of Wave's caliber. He's a skilled fighter, Naruto acknowledged. Indeed, one of my selections for the Jaegers regardless of today's outcome. Esdeath studied him with undisguised interest. Your final opponent is unusual, fighting style unregistered in Imperial records, background unverified. Be cautious. The warning surprised Naruto. You don't know who they are. A late entry, approved directly by the tournament committee. Esdeath's expression suggested this approval had not come from her. Someone wants to test you specifically. With that cryptic statement, she departed, returning to the official box where the Prime Minister watched with barely concealed